There is a huge 100-year-old food forest where practically endless amounts of free food just falls to the ground all across town, and almost no one even notices. This is the John Hershey Food Forest. Despite being completely neglected for over half a century, these trees are still as abundant as ever, in part because they were carefully selected by a genius plant breeder. So it got me thinking, could this abandoned food forest be the definitive proof that once you get a food forest going, all of your work is just managing the abundance? And could the special trees in this food forest be propagated and replanted to create jungles of fruit and nut trees? I'm here to explore and study the abandoned John Hershey Food Forest in Pennsylvania with one of the folks who rediscovered it, my friend Dale Hendricks.
Here we are with one of John Hershey's old trees. Isn't it cool to see a tree this big that's obviously grafted? Grafting is just a way of propagating trees and shrubs so you get an improved variety, just kind of cutting and mating the wood pieces, and kaboom, once that top one starts to grow, you have a grafted tree so that the top part is the improved variety you want. So this was planted probably closer to 1921 when he first started planting. This is like the oldest grafted tree we're likely to see in our lifetimes.
So who actually was this genius plant breeder?
John Hershey lived from around 1898 to 1967. A lot of the story begins in the Dust Bowl.
It's hard to imagine just how horrific the Dust Bowl was. It was one of the largest migrations in American history, with millions of impoverished people fleeing their farms because the soil literally blew away. This was largely caused by harmful agricultural practices like heavy tillage and clearing the hedgerows that left the land vulnerable to extreme erosion. But John Hershey had a vision for how to create an entirely new ecological food system of abundance, using trees to help hold the soil together.
So Hershey got this ideal job running this experimental farm and collecting all the best improved trees and shrubs for farmers. So this was a way to have a frugal and diverse farm that didn't need a lot of inputs. If you have pigs, chickens, cows, sheep grazing and being fed by trees, you can be regenerating soil, having cleaner water, working in the opposite direction of making the Dust Bowl. And that's why the story here is important, why he's still celebrated.
One of the wildest things is that the remnants of this epic food forest are scattered throughout the town. Most people don't even notice, but Dale's not exactly your typical guy. He's on another level with his ability to identify a bunch of hidden gems. And this is where the details get really interesting.
Since Hershey left us, this road came in, this church was developed, and little bits of loveliness are left. So there's pecan, honey locust.
Whoa, you just don't see giant edible honey locust pods every day.
So here we are at the really tasty, super excellent persimmons. These American persimmons are bigger trees, smaller fruits, but there's a huge amount. Every year, these are prolific producers with no care whatsoever. These are just neglected. You know, a lot of people don't see the food they walk by. Part of, what we're trying to do in permaculture is opening people's eyes to the fact that they're surrounded by abundance. And we just have to find ways to harvest it.
It's amazing because you would go around this place and you would not recognize that you are in the middle of this extreme food production system.
It's crazy, the gems that are still here in the side yard of daycare and commercial medical buildings and dumpsters. You've got this cool walnut that actually has 3 different varieties grafted onto it. 1, 2 varieties, 3 the original. So you've got a 3-in-1 grafted walnut just hiding here behind the daycare center. Why did he do this? My guess is he got varieties. Someone sent him some improved walnuts. He thought, oh boy, well, I can pop them on top of here, get on a step ladder and graft on top here.
Only a tree wizard like Dale would ever notice something like that. But these are the kind of details that make this a Noah's Ark of rare and prolific food plants.
So this is the 72-acre farm that Hershey and his wife bought in 1945. So we're in front of John Hershey's old farmhouse. And we're in front of a grafted heartnut tree. Heartnut, look at this, well named, is a Japanese walnut. Nice clusters of them up there. Just below Hershey's old house, we have his little persimmon experimental area. It seems like this whole lower yard here has kind of one each of about 8 or 10 really cool different varieties of persimmon.
This is one of the most diverse food forests I've ever seen. This is mad scientist level plant breeding.
These are all American persimmons. Look carefully at the base. This is the graft mark, you see it? All of these have some seed, but they have no bitterness. They're the sweetest persimmons you'll find, and they're very, very, very productive.
Isn't it so weird that the suburbs just grew right up into this food forest? This is probably enough fruit and nuts for the whole town.
With these widely spaced trees, it feels like a park. And in fact, this actually is currently functioning as a park with 100-year-old trees producing large yields of food year after year, decade after decade, and with some species, century after century. With no inputs, no irrigation, no fertilizing. These trees have their roots deep, deep down in the soil. This is actually a great model for how housing can be integrated with long-term resilient food production all over the country, all over the world. So this is the future of food.
It's funny, you know, we didn't seek this out. This is a rabbit hole that we found ourselves delving into by accident. I'm honored to be one of many people rediscovering for the third, fourth, or fifth time the Hershey trees and to help get both the plants and the story out there.
These are some extremely special tree varieties that need to be propagated and shared. Turns out, Dale's already ahead of me on that idea. After years of studying these trees, he's picked the best ones and he's growing a repository at his own house to spread them around the world, like a modern-day Johnny Appleseed.
So here we are in Landenberg, PA, 40 minutes south of Downingtown. Welcome to what we call the Hippie Homestead, a little nursery called Greenlight Plants. So what we have here is kind of a Noah's Ark of Hershey persimmon varieties behind us, 2 each of 7 different varieties right from Hershey's trees. I could get 50 or 100 trees by cutting and grafting these branches on in the next year or so. We're also growing and grafting some of his varieties of mulberries. He grew lots of different kinds of mulberries, and this was his favorite. So this still bears here in the mid-August, big berries, yay big, very, very, very flavorful and sweet. The Illinois everbearing kind of soldiers on, kind of like the Hershey story and his trees from yesterday. We do all we can with educating locals on the treasures they have and trying to see that they're preserved. But the other thing we do is letting people know how wonderful agroforestry is and a permaculture-influenced, multi-layered farmscape. We have our little role right now of being the unpaid Hershey tour guide and storyteller. It's important to preserve this legacy, and I'm thrilled when people are tuned in enough to appreciate its importance and its sweetness and its local applicability. His experiment is hugely important because we can build now productive food forests that will withstand the test of time. Some of these have already crossed the century mark and are still productive plants. The experiment goes on, and people like Hershey come and sadly go, but we all play our part.
John Hershey's work proves that abundant and long-lasting food forests are possible with very little work once they're fully established. While this is one of the oldest intact examples in America, this continent was once full of food forest ecosystems that were created by indigenous communities. And they deserve a lot of credit for thousands of years of work tending and selecting the native tree varieties that made John Hershey's work possible in the first place. So I say, let's use these food forest techniques to feed people and restore ecosystems across the world. Are you ready to transform deserts, create lush backyards, and feed communities?
In my almost 30 years as a permaculture designer traveling the world, I've put everything I learned into Oregon State University's online permaculture design course, or PDC. The PDC and PDC Pro are the ultimate ways to begin mastering permaculture. Me and my team guide you through over 20 assignments with more than 100 hours of top quality video lectures and resources, all focused on developing your own property or project throughout the course. You'll get personalized feedback from a dedicated instructor in a small group setting. People are always asking me, how can I be part of the solution? This is your starting point. Check the link below for upcoming courses and join us in creating a better world for everyone. See you in class.